recording. And let me pull up the PowerPoint. Hold on. Any other questions, comments from last time before we dive into today? What'd you think about the research? That good, huh?
I need more time or a person dedicated to do that. That's what I loved it, but
Yeah.
It's time consuming, and even I don't do it anymore. I don't have the time. I have somebody who does the research for me because it does take time, and to do it right and to do it well, you definitely need to take the time to really dive in. But there's a lot there, and it's one of those things where if you can take the time, it's certainly worth the opportunity, worth it to find those opportunities. There's a lot of, I'm going to call it garbage. And there's a lot where you go, oh, this would be perfect, but they won't fund into it. And you go, well, then it's not perfect, right? And you go, oh crap, and you move on. I've got a client in, I think she's in Bureau County, Illinois. There are not a lot of grants down there. And I just learned about a new funding source, and I went, and it's 9 counties. So I went, ooh, let me look. Nope, doesn't go there. So, you just kind of have to keep looking and seeing what you can find. I love your projects. I think on every one of yours, I made the comment of, okay, next step, call the funder. That is such a critically important piece that a lot of people really overlook. And when I talk to the funders, sometimes, if we write something and it's not funded, I'll say, okay, so funder, we've got a good relationship. Why didn't this get funded? And they'll be like, we didn't know anything about it. Or the board had questions I couldn't answer. If they would have come and talked to me about it first, I could have answered those questions. Doesn't mean that would have been funded, but it would have had a better shot. And I've had a funder say, tell your clients, reiterate, come talk to me because I can advocate on your behalf. I don't have a vote, but I can advocate. And as annoying as it is sometimes to have a funder tell you, great project, but I don't think our board's going to be interested. Okay, then I'm not going to waste my time. I've got 3 other things I can ask you for. Let me find out if any of those are of interest. So I'd much rather spend my time productively than waste it on something else. So that if you didn't learn anything else after last, 2 things. 1, research is a lot of fun and a lot of work. And 2, call the funder is the other thing. So anything else from last week before we move on to this week?
actually,
All
Lena,
right.
I do
ahead.
have a question. So I guess, calling the funder, and maybe we're going to get into it so we can put a pin in it if we need to, but how much structure should there be in that call? So do I call and say, I'd like to set up time and go through everything I have? Or is it, do I say I want 10 minutes to introduce myself and get to know you? I don't want to go overboard with it, but I also don't want to be wasting their time with a trivial little call.
I think it starts with your purpose. What's your purpose of the call? If the purpose of your call is just, hey, I want you to know who New Kingdom Trail Riders is. So I'm just want to introduce what we do. Maybe a 10-minute call is enough. If your purpose is, hey, I've got this great project, we need to do some renovation, we've got to expand. I think that's a broader call. And in fact, I would recommend for something like that, invite them to your place.
Okay.
If you have something visual that you can show them, show them.
Okay,
If there's an opportunity for them to see your clientele, invite them to see your clientele. Now, we don't want to, what's the word I'm thinking of? Use your clients inappropriately, right?
right.
We're gonna parade out, here's, the people we serve, but, and some of you like, a trauma-informed care, you do great work, I don't mean it that way, but it's not very visual, right? Unless you invite them to a training, and that would actually be kind of cool. So it's, you've got to think about what's your purpose and what's the best way to achieve that purpose. If they don't know you, that might actually be a longer first meeting to say,
Yeah.
hey, come on out to the barn. We want to show you what we do. And, we've got a class going at such and such a time, and so would love for you to come and, meet some of the people, assuming that's appropriate. And, watch our staff and our volunteers and our horses in action. And then when you're there, not only giving them the big picture, but then giving them and hey, this is all the space we have. And as we're growing, let me show you my vision. And I think that would go a very long way.
Awesome. Thank you.
If they won't come, then you do that over the phone, or you go to them. I'm much prefer face-to-face,
Yeah.
especially as you're developing a relationship. So as much as you can make that first meeting face-to-face, the better. And the funders know, and most of our local funders are very good. They are more than happy to take your calls. When I'll send clients like to go talk to Matt Mendenhall at RDA, I'm like, you got to go talk to him. Okay. And then I'm going to call back. He was really nice. I go, aw.
Yeah, Matt sets the bar. That's the problem. I've met with Matt, and then everybody else is like, oh man, I just want them all to be like Matt.
We need to tell Matt that. Well, I'm sure some people do, but
he would appreciate that. But and most of the others locally are also very good. There are a few who are less than willing to talk to you, but in general, I think they're pretty good. And when you get outside of the region, again, I think as we talked about last time, this is their job, is to find good organizations to support that fit their mission. So they don't know about you until you tell them, right? And so tell them, and that way that allows them to fulfill their mission as well. Good question. All right, let's jump in for this week and talk about the needs statement. As I think I alluded to last time, in my mind, the needs statement is pretty much the most important piece of the application. It's also, in my experience, usually the worst written aspect of the application. So we're going to spend the whole time today talking about needs statements. And that's your homework for next time, if you haven't looked ahead, is to write your needs statement. And because of the way our schedule got discombobulated, usually you have 2 weeks to write it. You're going to have 1, but keep working on it all class, it's not graded, so you don't need to worry about it. So the reason why the needs statement is the most important part of your application is because that's what persuades the funder to act. Your application has 2 goals. Well, one overarching goal to get you money, but getting you money is achieved in 2 ways. Number 1, there's a big problem in our community. And number 2, we can solve it. And so this is number 1. There's a big problem in our community. And you'd be amazed at what funders and grant reviewers don't know. I was doing a feasibility study for a client, and that's where, you go out to funders and you basically say, hey, this organization wants to do this really big project. Usually it's a capital campaign. Here's what they're planning to do. They need to raise millions of dollars. Would you likely be a contributor to it, so that before they launch a multi-million-dollar campaign, they have a pretty good idea that it's going to succeed. And I think we were talking about, I think this was for early childhood education. And the person I was talking to, and I won't tell you who, but it is one of our prominent funders who I'm going, you should know this stuff, was like asking basic questions about, well, why is this a problem? Why do we need early child? I'm going, really? You don't know this? And so don't assume your reviewers know anything. You're embedded in your mission 24/7, right? You know why ovarian cancer is an issue. You know why, women need extra time to heal from domestic violence. You know why it's important to have cultural events into it. So make sure you're telling them, this is what's going to persuade them to act. When they get to the end of reading your needs statement, they should go, holy crap, we need to do something. And we're going to help you get to the holy crap moment, okay? It outlines the problem. And too often what I see in needs statements is that the problem really gets glossed over. And I see increasingly applications not giving you a whole lot of room to explain the problem either, which is a challenge. So you're going to have to be really concise for some of them. But again, as I said before, don't assume your funder knows why it's a problem. You want to phrase the problem in your funder's terms. Most of the issues that you guys deal with are very multifaceted. So it's, we'll pick on hunger, and I'm not picking on any one of you. There's a lot of food insecure people in our communities. And okay, that's a bad thing, right? Why? When you're hungry, it hurts your health, your physical health, it hurts your mental health. For kids, it hurts their learning. For adults, it keeps them out of the workforce. It prevents them from, kind of achieving higher order standard stuff. Because if every day you're waking up going, how am I going to feed myself and my kids? You don't have time to go, gee, I should go to school. I should do this. I should do that. So lots of different problems. What are we going to talk about in our application? It depends on what the funder's interested in. So if the funder is interested in kindergarten readiness, we're going to talk about hunger in our community hurts kindergarten readiness. If they're interested in workforce development, we're going to talk about hunger in our community hurts workforce development. If they're interested in solving chronic disease, they're going to talk about hunger causes chronic disease. Okay, which is why we spend the first day going, who are your funders and what are they interested in? So you need to make sure as you're working on your needs statement, and you're going to be writing it for whichever funder it is you've identified, what aspect of your problem are they interested in? And that's also why when we were talking last week about how do we identify our funders, we looked at our why. What are all the reasons why you might want to solve your problem? Hunger, we just opened up a whole lot more avenues. But if the funder's interested in kindergarten readiness, they don't care that it also helps the parents work, right? Your goal always, don't make the reviewer think. And so phrase it in the funder's terms. I'll even go so far as to parrot the words the funder uses. If they use the word kindergarten readiness, I'm going to use the word kindergarten readiness. If they use the word, third grade reading level, I'm going to use the word third grade reading level, because I'm going to make it very clear to them, I'm doing what you're asking me to do, or the problem is in the area that you're looking at. Okay, make sense? Yeah. And
Yeah, I have a question. When I have done some of that for something like a nursing profession, they expect the references and what have you. what about our local or regional grantees? Like, should I be a lot of people don't understand person-centeredness at all if they're not if they're not a social worker or in certain healthcare realms. Will that give me more bang for my buck, or is it more confusing, or what?
You want to speak the language of the funder.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what that what that means is that you're gonna write it in a way that your reviewers are most likely to understand it. So if you're writing a proposal, we'll just pick on RDA since we started picking on that. My guess is that the general population who's reviewing that probably doesn't understand person-centered care. So you're going to explain it, and not in highly technical terms. You're going to explain it the way you would explain to a lay person. Now, when it comes to references, my philosophy is you do what the funder asks. And if they are asking you for 500 characters to explain your needs statement, I'm not going to waste 100 of those giving them a reference. And if this is a general audience who's reading it, that's only going to confuse them. So what I would do in that case is sometimes I will say, research says, blah, 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 blah. Since we're on the needs statement, it would probably be, a lot of times I pull a lot of data from the Census Bureau. So according to the 2020 census, here's how many people are in Scott County. For hunger data, a lot of it's Feeding America. So according to Feeding America in 2022, there were this many people food insecure. So it's again, referencing is also what does the funder want? Absolutely, you're writing a federal grant to a nursing organization. You better footnote the heck out of that sucker with everything. Yep, good question. You're going to make sure you've got data that supports your claims in your needs statement. Too often I read needs statements that are full of claims and nothing is supported. We're talking a minute about what that means. We're going to tell stories. People give to people. And so that means two things. Number one, we're going to talk about the people you serve, not just, your organization. And we're going to do it in a very human way so that the people who are reading it are engaged in the stories that you're telling. And again, we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. We're also going to answer the why and the so what. But why are you doing what you're doing? Not just, hunger is a problem. Well, why is it a problem? And so we're gonna focus on our why as well. Questions on the overview before we jump into arguments? All right. Arguments are how we're going to have our data supporting our claim. So our arguments are, we use arguments throughout our application, but especially in our needs statement, because it helps improve the believability of what it is that you're saying. So I can say hunger's an issue. Well, no, it's not. Go to the grocery store, it's packed. There's ton, everybody's buying food. Yeah, right. Or yeah, I know I skipped breakfast this morning. I'm hungry. Yeah, no, you're not. Right. So it helps to make your argument deeper. It substantiates your case. It makes it so that it's much more logical why the reader would want to believe your need. And if we're doing it correctly, what we're doing is we are anticipating the arguments that the counter arguments your readers are going to have, and we're going to answer. Okay. I've written some grants for our local private schools, or for a number of private schools. And what I always hear when I talk to potential funders about, that's where all the rich kids go. No, they don't. I mean, yeah, they have some, but they have students who aren't. And so I've even written in applications, you might think this is where all the rich kids go, but 30% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So it's a way to both think through what you're saying and then to really go, okay, here's where I think our arguments are the weakest, and I'm gonna answer them up front to take that out of people's minds. We're writing a grant right now for an organization in Bettendorf that's serving low-income individuals. And we know that the reviewers know there's no low-income income. It's Bettendorf, come on. 30% Bettendorf residents live in poverty is what I recall the statistic is. So we put that in there and we even said, well, Bettendorf has a reputation of not having low-income people. Guess what? It does. So we're countering that disagreement. So how do we use arguments? Arguments have three parts to them. First part is a claim. The claim is what you want your audience to believe. What am I trying to prove? So I'm trying to prove in this example that children in this neighborhood need additional support. This is a totally made up argument for why we need to open a community center in whatever this neighborhood is. And so why do we need that? Because children in this neighborhood need more support. We support that with data. And data is what allows you to draw the conclusion of the claim. So data supports your claim. In this case, our data is 56% of the kids in this neighborhood come from single parent households who earn less than 150% of the poverty level. Because of that, we're drawing the conclusion that kids in this neighborhood need more support. The warrant is what allows us to draw the conclusion of the claim from the data. So the warrant is what comes in between. So because 54% of the kids in this neighborhood come from single family parents who earn less than 150% of the poverty level, why does that mean they need more support? That's your warrant, which is children from single parent and poverty households need more support. They have a gap. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. If you remember your college logic class, this is a syllogism. Okay. Now, you aren't going to write this way in your application necessarily, but you should be thinking and reviewing this way. So your application would say, children in this neighborhood need more support. Too often I see it end there. And so what you want to do is say 54% of the children in this neighborhood come from single parent households who earn less than 150% of poverty. Research suggests that when you start life under those circumstances, you have less likelihood of whatever kind of success we are looking for. Academic success, you're more likely to be hungry, you're more likely to be sick, you're less likely to have a doctor, whatever our goal is. Okay, let me give you another example. In this one, the claim is organization X has the experience, expertise, and track record to provide the needed skills to these students. This wouldn't be part of your needs statement. This would be actually part of your project plan. But oftentimes you need to demonstrate why me, right? We're going to build a community center in this neighborhood, but why are you the organization to do it? Our data is going to be, since beginning the after-school program, ITBS scores of participants rose 10 points compared to losing 2 points for non-participants. Look, we've raised ITBS scores of participants. Obviously, our goal now is academic success. Therefore, we have the experience, expertise, and track record. Our warrant that connects the two of those, there's a bunch of them here. First of all, ITBS scores measure achievement, which we could debate. These increases are due to the after-school program, which we could debate, and our past success equals our future success, which again, we could debate. And when you look at your warrants, often that's the weakest part of your argument, and you can kind of go, Oh, I don't think, my audience is gonna buy that ITBS scores, yep, that's the gold standard. If there's ITBS scores went up, yes, that's achievement, you move on. My audience doesn't believe that. I need additional data to prove that ITBS scores measure achievement, et cetera. Okay, make sense? Now, often in your applications, they aren't that simple. You'll have one claim that has data attached to it, that has its warrant. Then it'll have a second piece of data for the claim with its warrant. Then you'll have a third piece of data. So I made it simple for the purposes of demonstration, but recognize that, your claim might be students in this neighborhood need more support. They come from low income, there's a lot of violence, there's poor health, they don't eat, blah, 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 right? And so you might have multiple data points for those. When we talk about data, we can mean lots of different things. Statistics are the most obvious kind of data that you can use. The research shows that people are moved by both statistics and by feeling. So in fact, men are more moved by logic, women are more moved by emotion, typically. You don't know who your reviewers are, and those are typicals. That doesn't mean everybody. So you want to do a good blend of both. When you're using statistics, you want to make sure you're explaining them. So for example, if I said 20% of Quad City kids are hungry, food insecure, is that a lot? I don't know. Put
Depends
it
on
in
your-
context.
Depends on your state and national levels, yeah.
Yep. 20% of Quad City kids are food insecure compared to 50% across the state. We're doing pretty good. By the way, I totally make up all these statistics, so do not quote any of the statistics. Or a whopping 20% of Quad City kids are food insecure. That means that in the average kindergarten class, 5 kids did not have breakfast this morning. Like, whoa. Math isn't right, but anyway, I'm also horrible at math, so don't take any of that. So you want to make sure you're explaining your statistics. And I've got an example coming up in a minute that shows you one way to do that. And again, write your statistics for your audience. It doesn't, is it 20%? Is it 19.853%? 19.853 is a whole lot harder to read and interpret, especially when you're reading a ton of applications really fast. 1 in 5 is easier, 20% is easier. If it's actually 17% and you say about 20%, you're fine. This isn't medical research where it has to be exact, okay? Depending upon your audience, right? Obviously, if you're writing a nursing grant, make sure you've got that specific. Okay,
Linda?
you unmuted. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Where's good places to get statistics? I mean, that's kind of the question that we've run into on our most recent grant writings is, local library. I know that there's things specific to certain types of nonprofits. Obviously, if you're getting a medical grant, you're going to probably source the school that probably has done research that maybe feeds into your organization or in some way. But I'm just wondering, as far as general statistical information or good sources for it that are maybe nonpartisan, where do you go?
Yep. Good question. Lindsay, you've got the slides up. Do I have a slide on where to get data? If so, I'll wait. If not, then
I don't know.
Okay, then I'll tell you now.
I
Okay.
didn't print my stuff out very well. It's
Sometimes
it's funny looking.
I include that. That's why.
I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see
Okay,
it.
thank you. My favorite places to get statistics, number 1 is the US Census Bureau. They've got a page called Fast Facts. And what you can do is you can look at the country, the city, the county. If you're really good and patient, you can get it down to the block level. Yeah, the census data is amazing. And it has not only things like number of people, it has poverty, it has education level, it has health insurance rates, it has demographics, race, age, tons of stuff. That's usually my go-to place first is the US Census Bureau, and I'll extrapolate. Extrapolating from this census data, I conclude that there are 1,800 Rock Island residents of color who dropped out of high school, right? Because I can kind of do the math. I do actually like doing math. I just can't do it on the fly in my head. Second place I really love are school report cards. No Child Left Behind did some really wonderful things, and that was schools have to report their data. Now, Iowa and Illinois, of course, are different, and I'm sure Iowa and Nebraska are different, Kit, for where you are. But what's nice about that is I can get it more to the neighborhood level-ish. Now, obviously, it's reporting on the kids, but guess what? Kids in poverty come from families in poverty, right? And I can extrapolate that if 20% of the kids in that school are people of color, probably 20% of the families in that neighborhood are, et cetera. So I love using school district data as well, especially if I'm working with kids and especially if I'm smaller than the citywide. But you can also, you can pull it by school, you can pull it by school district. And if we're doing like when we were our fake example there about outcomes for learning, they have learning outcomes. So you can see what percentage of the students in this school or school district meet third grade reading level, meet science targets, meet math, etc. Otherwise, and there's others I use, but probably the third most common thing I use is good old Google. So if I want to know, how many people get abused by a domestic partner, I'll Google it. And then but I won't just say, the domestic violence rate is 1 per every 2.53 million people. And I don't know what that is. But what I'll say is, according to whomever, the CDC, 20% of women are abused by a domestic partner. In the Quad Cities, that extrapolates to 35,000 women. And I get the 35,000 women by looking at, here's the population of the Quad Cities, 51% of the population is women. Of that, totally making this up, 75% is over the age of 18, which means they're adults. That gives me this number, and then 20% of that is, etc. So those are the places I'll use the most. The other thing, don't forget, is your own files and each other. I was working on a case statement one time, and I wanted to know what's the rate of abuse and violence for people with disabilities. And I could not find it. And I could not find something I was comfortable extrapolating from. And then I'm like, duh, Child Abuse Council has that. So I called. I had an answer in 5 minutes. I probably emailed. So think about who are the experts in the community for things like what you're looking for. Your cities keep great statistics. If it's economic development kinds of things like you're doing, Caitlin, the Chamber of Commerce, the economic development offices, all of those have great data for you. Okay, good question. Thank you. But all your data doesn't have to be numbers and statistics. Testimonials can be really good. We're gonna talk about stories in a minute, and I'll show you kind of how we use stories and testimonials to support it. It can be, and oftentimes we use that, well, I guess we do use that on need statement, let me tell you about a mom who says how she can't even think about getting a job because she's spending her whole day trying to figure out how to get food for her kids, right? That would be data. Expert opinion, that would be using quotes, research. If sometimes I'll find things and it's like, okay, I need somebody to tell me this is a big problem. And so we'll just like you're writing a paper, right? Do the research and say, according to Dr. John Doe, this is a really big problem. The other type is what I call common sense, because sometimes this is the right conclusion, but you really can't find the data to support it. But you don't just want to leave that claim out there hanging, you at least have to explain it. And where I really came to appreciate this type of data, I was writing an application and the problem was lack of clothing for clothing pantry, right? And you kind of think about, or maybe you don't think about, imagine if you didn't have clothes, what would you do? Right? And so I was like Googling problem with no clothes. Got interesting stuff. How many people are clothes insecure? That's not data that's kept. And so finally I'm like, well, let me think about it. What would happen in the dead of winter if all you had to wear was what you have on today? I've got sandals on. I don't know about you guys. That's not what I want to be wearing in January, right? And so in making the argument about the importance of clothing, the data became, just imagine if all you had to wear in the dead of a Quad City winter, because I was writing to a Quad City funder, was flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt. And actually that was a true story because the client we were working with had a family who came in and that's all they had. And so that also became a testimonial and we were able to say that happened with one family. So sometimes it's just common sense, but don't just leave that data or that claim hanging there. Explain it for your reader and explain it in terms that they understand. And a lot of my examples are Quad City examples because that's a lot of the grants we write, but you want to make sure if you're writing to a more national audience, they don't know what the Quad Cities is. They don't know what a Quad City winter is, right? Explain it in terms that they're going to understand, okay? Some common errors we find in arguments, very often there's no data supporting the claim. When I taught for 20 years on and off, and the papers would be claim, 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 claim. I'm like, why do you say this? Why are you telling me hunger is an issue? Right? Give me the data. Often, but less frequently, there's data and no claim. 20% of the kids in the Quad Cities show up at school without having breakfast. Okay, is that good or bad? I don't know. Last year it was 50. I'm excited it's only 20, right? Last year it was 5. Our goal should be 0, right? I mean, all of those are different claims that you could make from that data. Don't make your reviewer think. Tell them what it is you're trying to prove, and that's your claim, okay? The warrant doesn't link the data to the claim. If you want to see really good examples of this, watch political advertising, listen to politics. It doesn't matter what side, the sky is blue, therefore you should vote for my candidate. I mean, that's kind of how ridiculous some of those get. But really think about what's allowing them to draw that conclusion from that data. And you may not be writing the warrants in your information, in your narrative, but at least be thinking through, because that's what's in your reviewers' heads. It's what they're thinking. There's also a number of fallacies that are common argument errors. Ad hominem is when you attack the person, not the argument. So we need you need to fund our organization because our competitors are stupid. You would never say that. But you'd be surprised. But that's what an ad hominem is. A non sequitur is when it doesn't follow, is what that means. So the sky is blue, so vote for my candidate is a non sequitur. It's like, what? How'd you get there? You'd be surprised. Post hoc ergo propter hoc basically means just because it doesn't follow doesn't mean it caused. That'd be a very loose translation. So you see this a lot in like superstitions, right? I wore my red socks to school today and I got an A. Therefore, I have to wear my red socks all the time because that's what gave me the A. Just because something comes before doesn't mean it caused it. And that I'll have people who, when we're writing the need statement or writing the application are like, well, but I can't prove that the fact that, they went in our program means that that's why their reading scores went up. I'm like, this isn't scientific research, right? If this is cancer research, yeah, I want to know it's this drug that did it, right? This isn't it. So you can take a few liberties there. So post hoc fallacies, I'm a little less concerned about, but just make sure they make sense. Hasty generalization is when you draw too broad a conclusion from too few examples. So, and actually we use hasty generalizations a lot when we use a testimonial, because I'm talking about, Susie's mom can't go to work because she's too busy figuring out how to feed Susie. Well, maybe the other 99 moms who are facing food insecurity have figured it out, right? And you're picking the one example. So just keep those in mind as you're looking at the data and the arguments in your need statement. So let me give you an example. Again, totally made up. Any town, county has a growing elderly population with 20% of their residents currently over the age of 65. Census data projects will reach 30% by 2025. That equates to 5,000 seniors in various stages of health and mobility. So we know what's our claim? Population's growing. What's our data? It's going from 20% today to 30% tomorrow. So what? That's 5,000 seniors. I just defined the scope of the need. Okay. Let me give you another example. Cancer obviously affects people physically, but it can also take a significant emotional toll on patients and those close to them, both during and after treatment. Research conducted by City of Hope, a nonprofit research center, suggests that the stress associated with cancer can have negative physical, psychosocial, and emotional consequences, thwarting attempts by the body to heal. So this is an example of using research, of using expert opinion. This is an actual one from grants that we would write. If we didn't have enough room, we would just say research suggests or research conducted by City of Hope. This is the longer version that has all of that information in. Okay. Questions on using data before we move to stories?
With something like mine, which is more of like an aesthetic community type of thing, what kind of statistics or should I just use more stories?
More anecdotal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always try to put some statistics in there because you have the logical people who are reading your application.
Yeah.
So why are aesthetics important? Just have a conversation. Why is it important?
I would say it's competitive, makes the marketability of something more competitive if you have an
Okay.
aesthetic.
Okay,
to me, that's getting really, it's getting capitalist, but that's, I would say,
depends on your funder though.
yep.
Well, I know the bigger one that I'm looking at, I have two kind of smaller ones that funders that I'm looking at, but the bigger one is an incredibly broad and flexible funder. And all it says is that their mission is to inspire communities by connecting people with causes and resources for all generations.
Jeez.
That's what it is. And I'm like, what direction do I take this?
Yeah, that's pretty vague.
Yeah. And I know of some that they've done, but basically they pick what they like. So I'm like, which is great, but I'm like, what direction do I take this in? And then the other one's the city, and it's literally to promote aesthetic improvement in the downtown area, and the city
Which is better
administrator.
better tourism, right? It's better.
Yeah. And well, I'm
Okay.
not too worried about this one because the city administrator's on my committee for this. But it's this other one that I'm like, what direction do I take it?
Well, and I would look and see what have they funded in the past? Do you see any kind of pattern? If you're like, ooh, I'm seeing lots of tourism grants, then you're going, okay, maybe they're interested in tourism. Better aesthetics reduces crime. Is there, are they doing things that are interested in reducing crime? It improves property values.
Yes, it does.
Brings residents, which brings tax dollars, right?
That's right.
All of those are reasons to improve the aesthetic. It improves quality of life. There's a lot of good information about that. So that's the kind of research I would conduct, and looking at that broader funder, I would see what they funded, then I'd call them and have a conversation, talk to them about what you're doing. Talk to them not just about your what, but your why. We want to, buy more Christmas lights and improve our downtown because, it brings tourism, and kind of see, do their eyes glaze over or do they brighten up? They glaze over, they're not interested. If they're like, ooh, yeah, tell me more. Okay, there's a big clue that you want to talk about tourism.
Okay.
Have you looked at the Iowa tourism grant? Look at the Iowa tourism grant. It's coming due in end of September.
Okay.
That
What
might
is
fit you.
you know what
It's
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if it was through Iowa Tour. I definitely know what Iowa tourism is. What is it? Or what? We got a grant last year for one of our events where we were able to bring 5 people into our community, and then we were able to post them up in a hotel room for the night for our annual Autumn Fest. And I think that was the grant. Actually, I'm pretty sure that was the grant that we got for that.
You might look at that again, because that might help with this project too.
Okay.
Kelly, you were unmuted. Did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna see if there was any information from your local chamber about like sales that you could show, from different events that have already happened, the increase or influx in tourism and sales.
So, yes. And a lot of it's all word of mouth. We don't really take statistics necessarily because all of our events are free. All of our community ones that we do are free. So all of our funding is through membership and sponsorships. And so whatever we get through that. But I wonder what the best way to do that would be.
If you have anecdotal evidence, say it's anecdotal. Anecdotally, we know when we walk through downtown, it's packed on this weekend. And talk to a couple vendors. Vendors tell us this is their best weekend of the year.
Yeah.
Realtors tell us that, you know, people say, wow, they came for the Christmas festival and that's why they want to live and do it. Now, make sure you get that data and that all of that is true. Don't just say it. But, you know, there are ways to just kind of collect that anecdotal.
Yeah, and it's kind of going back to what you were saying about, you know, the first thing happened, so you're not sure if that was the cause of it or not. But we got a new, at the chamber 2 years ago, we got a new events and programs coordinator. And it's like there's like an uptick in everything. I mean, like marketing and people coming and all of these things, and so that might be hard to do too. I mean, tourism has a huge, you know, but she's definitely kicked it up a notch. So,
but you know,
go ahead.
You hired her for a reason, right? There was some need in your community for more tourism, and tourism is valuable to your community, right? So you can even go back and see what was the case to hire, you know, her / that position and use some of that data too.
Okay.
Linda, I have another question. It might be a little off topic here, but it's about funders in general. Like when I went on the fund center newsletter thing, you see a lot of private foundations funding, but I'm curious, do tax dollar funded things appear through those newsletters, or is that a separate deal? Like if you're looking for, you know, the state money to fund something, or is that a different way of research, or is it all in Fund Center? Is it all there?
The Foundation Center has federal grants, but it's not very helpful. It does not have state grants, so you want to go to the state websites.
So for particular department, is that where you would look? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep, that's where I would go. Okay.
All
right. Let's talk about telling a story. Those of you who love data, that you're going to go, this is so wishy-washy. Those of you who are going data, bleh, you're going to love this part. You want to make sure, first of all, your entire application is going to tell a coherent story. And we're going to keep reiterating that piece throughout. And, you know, as I said last week, we're breaking things up in chunks to make it just more manageable, but we're going to write our grant in totality. So we're going to keep coming back to this as well. But you also want to tell stories within your application. Couple reasons. First of all, a story is the best way to connect the known to the unknown in the reader's mind. So when we talk about, you know, there's hunger in our community. Yeah, right, whatever. No, imagine if you go home tonight and you've got a box of crackers and, you know, 3 sips of milk to feed your family of 5. That's what families face. And you're going, holy crap, wow, that's bad, right? And so a story is a good way to do that. Stories also are a good way to get your reader involved and to better transmit information and values. You want your reader of your application, who, if you think about it, at the end of a very long day of work or, you know, whatever, now gets to sit down and read 20 grant applications, half of which are really crappy. And they're kind of half falling asleep and kind of reading through it. When you tell a story, what it does is it involves all of your readers' senses, if you're doing it correctly, which is going to keep them reading, keep them engaged, keep them thinking. If you do it really well, they want to know what's happening next, right? Think about, I don't know how many of you are readers, but I know there have been many a night when I'm like, one more chapter, one more chapter, one more chapter. You want them having that thought with your grant application. Oh, I want to see how they're going to solve this. This is so cool. And you're going to do that through stories. It's going to trigger an emotional response if you tell a good story, which is gonna enhance memory and empathy. Maya Angelou once said, people won't remember what you tell them, but they will remember how you made them feel. You want your application to make them feel. And what happens oftentimes when grants are reviewed, if they have panels that are reviewing, we would all be reading applications and we would be going, okay, we've got 10 applications. Which ones are we going to fund? You've read them all. You've scored them all. You know, maybe it was a couple days ago. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. But so we're going, okay, well, what about this one? And you're going, oh, that was the one where they talked about the elderly couple. And yeah, I really liked that one, as opposed to, what's this one again? Oh, yeah, it's the same as all the others, right? So you want to have that kind of emotional response and for them to remember your application for the right reasons. Not, oh, yeah, that was the one full of typos and I didn't understand it. You want to be, wow, I really felt for that one. And if there is no other reason to tell a story, research shows when you listen to a story, it releases oxytocin in your brain and it makes you feel more trustworthy, generous, charitable, and compassionate. That's how I want my reviewers to feel. I want, after they read my application, to go, I like this organization, I trust them, and I know they're only asking for 10,000, but darn it, let's give them 15, right? When I ask people to review applications for me, I'll say, does it make you want to grab your wallet? Not to hide it, but to say, oh, shoot, I only have hundreds. Here's my credit card, right? And to make a donation to this. If it does, then you're doing a good job. If not, you need to go back. And stories are a lot of how we do that. How do we tell a story? We have 500 characters. How are we going to put a story in there? First of all, you can either talk about real or fictionalized people. We don't lie. You know, ovarian cancer doesn't kill people. Don't say it does. You know, if it's a happy death, don't say it's not. You know what I mean? But that's not true about the causes that we are working for, right? These are big, big problems. And you want to respect the privacy and the dignity of the people that you talk about. So if you can talk about a real person, and if you can use their names, that is the strongest. If you can't, you can tell a true story and you can anonymize it. You know, if you can't do that, then you can kind of merge some stories together. You know, my story about the 5 people on a box of crackers, is that true? No. And yes. Right? Do I know that family? No. Do I know that family exists? Yes. Right? So whatever you are comfortable with, they don't have to be real, but they do need to be true, if that makes sense.
As a chaplain, I have to use anonymous pretty much all the time when trying to tell a story. In those situations, is it better to just replace names and kind of change the story a bit? What's a good way to do that protects privacy? You know, what do you find yourself doing in those situations, Linda, when you kind of have to tell a story, but you can't release anything that really seems akin to what the actual events were, but does kind of summarize it? Are you just using like poetic voice there, or what are you doing?
Yep. Well, change the name. That's an easy way to do it. And you're not going to be able to tell a long-winded story anyway. 500 characters, right? 1,000 characters. That's all you've got. So you're going to have to kind of shorten it and only tell the important pieces anyway, which is going to take a lot of that context out. And there's lots of ways to shorten what you're saying, where you take a sentence and make it into a word, and you know, those kinds of things. So usually that's what I do, and I'll go back and forth and go, okay, is this identifiable through what you say? So just hit the highlights in the story is usually a good way to do that.
Okay.
Another way to tell a story is I'll continue characters throughout the grant. So we're going to get a story in a minute. about Jim and somebody. And so as we're talking about the problem, I'm introducing Jim as part of the problem or an exemplar of the problem. When I talk about the solution, I'll say, so that you can help people like Jim, right? It just kind of weaves that character throughout. And you know, instead of talking about a mom with 5 kids, I'll say Susie has 5 kids. And she's got a box of crackers. Won't you help all the Susies in our community, as a way to kind of weaving that through? I'll do this, by the way, also in solicitation letters, which is not why we're here, but the same thing works. Use very vivid adjectives and adverbs. We can say, you know, 20% of the people in our community suffer from food insecurity, yawn technical. 1 in 5 kids at Riverview Elementary School go to school with their tummies rumbling because there was nothing for breakfast at their house. Ooh. Rumbling tummies. How many of you can hear it? How many of you is it yours? Right? So really kind of use that very vivid language, and that will also engage your reader and tell them a very different story. When I use statistics, I love to use words like only. An astonishing 20% of kids in our community don't have breakfast every morning. That's very different than 20% of our kids, assuming I have the characters. Use personal nouns. I'll use names. I don't like very technical words, like I don't talk about youth. I don't talk about elderly. I will talk about our kids. I like kids better than youth. It's much more personal. I'll talk about our parents and grandparents. I'll talk about our neighbors. Talk about quad citizens. You know, using something that's much more personal that will really connect the person to the story that you're telling. Describe, don't tell. I was working on a case statement one time and I was writing about, you know, how did they come up with this campaign? How did they get here? Just as, you know, as a way of telling the history. And I must have started this 10 times. I'm like, well, yeah, it's boring. No, it's boring. It's not doing it. Finally, I went, duh, just tell the story, right? And so sometimes it's just tell the story. You don't have to tell me why it's a problem. Describe the problem. What is life like for the people that you are helping? Okay. And that's a good way to do it. Use emotional verbs. In our last class, I get to get on my soapbox and talk about active voice versus passive voice. Passive voice uses the verb is, which is a very weak verb, which makes for very weak writing. Active voice uses non-is verbs, which are much stronger. So Susie is hungry. Susie's tummy rumbles all day. Much different, right? So-and-so is abused. So-and-so has bruises up and down her body from her last encounter with her spouse, which yes, takes a lot more characters. But it paints a very different picture. So think about your verbs you're using and use very emotional verbs. Write more conversationally. People think that a grant needs to be this grandiose, verbose piece of literature. And if you're writing federal grants for some organizations, yes, you do. But even those are read by people. So write it in a way that tells the story that they can understand it. And if you get stuck, talk to somebody, right? Kind of like our conversation with Caitlin a minute ago, right? Caitlin, why are you doing this? Right? What's the reason why this is important? And just talk it out. And if you have somebody who can tease it out of you, that's even better, because the challenge is, you live and breathe this every day. It's a duh to you, right? Why is ovarian cancer a problem? Duh. Why do we need trauma-informed care? Duh, right? And if you have somebody asking you those questions and you're talking it through, you might find the language that you need. I was working with a biology professor one time. We were writing a grant for scholarships for biology students, non-health sciences students. And I said, okay, don't hate me. Why do we need biologists? And he kind of gave me one like, wow, that's really a harsh question. But then he thought about it and he kind of went, he had trouble articulating. It took him a while because it was a duh, right? But to the reviewers, it's not. So you got to explain it. And often that's best done very conversationally. Think about how you're moving your story. So too often I'll read things and they'll just kind of skip all over the place. All the ideas are there, but it's like it's going from here to here to here to here to here. And I'm going, I'm confused. You know, I know what I'm talking about, but I'm confused. And I've done that writing grants before. I go, okay, if I'm lost and I wrote this, that's not very good for the reviewer. So think about it. Can we describe things chronologically? First A happens, then B, then C, then D. Can we describe them, you know, temporally? Here's kind of how things are happening. And so just kind of look at what's the order that you're talking about things and make sure it makes sense. Good books, good movies, good TV shows move you seamlessly from one scene to the next. And if they're jumping around, especially in time, takes you a minute to figure it out, right? And usually there's cues or clues that say, okay, now we're going back in time here. Now we're moving forward. And you don't want your reader to do that much work. I'm going to do it for a good movie, TV show, or book. I'm not going to do it for a grant. So make sure it makes sense. Example of a story. Well, first of all, before I get to the example, any questions about how to tell a story? So we know that 20% of the seniors in any town suffer from disability mobility issues. And that number is growing to 30%. There are 5,000 of them. This is a story to build upon that. So Jane and Jim exemplify the average any town senior. Living on Social Security and Jim's meager pension, they have little savings. With Jim's declining health and Jane's growing dementia, many weeks Jim doesn't have the energy to cook a healthy meal and Jane forgets to eat. Like 1 in 4 seniors nationwide, which I could get by Googling, though I made it up, or 1,250 in any town, Jim and Jane fail to meet their minimum nutritional standards on a daily basis. Poor nutrition leads to poor health and inhibits the body's ability to fight infection or heal after injury. How many of you want to now give money to Meals on Wheels to get them food? Right? This is half a true story. Jim and Jane are my parents. Now, they didn't live in any town, and money was not an issue, but that's what helped make the story. My dad's health was declining. My mom had dementia. Food was an issue. So pulling that in and making the story fit, because are Jim and Jane real? Absolutely. You know, they're not my parents, but they are absolutely. The other thing that's in there is not just the what, but the so what, the last sentence. So Jim and Jane fail to meet their minimum nutritional standards on a daily basis. Who cares? No, not who cares. Here's why it's a problem. And that's the lesson. That's the so what. Okay. Make sense? I think we have another. Oh, we put them together and have any town, county has a growing elderly population. 20% of residents currently over 65. Census data projects will reach 30% by 2025. That equates to 5,000 seniors in various stages of health and mobility. Jane and Jim exemplify the average any town senior living on Social Security and Jim's meager income, blah, blah, blah. And that's probably about 750 characters. That can be your need statement. Okay. Questions about stories? All right, focus on the why. And I'll say the so what. Donors fund change, they don't fund stuff. They aren't going to fund a new office at New Kingdom Trail Riders. They aren't going to fund light bulbs for the Christmas pageant, right? They are, because that's what you're gonna put in your budget. But if you said, hey, we need new light bulbs, there you go. Okay, so focus on your why. What's the change you want to see happen in your community? And the need statement talks about what's the current state of your community, what needs to change. Okay, so always as you're reading through your need statement, as you're thinking about it, ask yourself why. I was teaching this class through AFP one time many years ago, and there was a young woman who was an intern at United Way who was in the class, and she's like, I want to write one for our early learning program. We give away diapers to mothers who attend. I'm like, okay, cool. Why is that a problem? Why should I help you fund diapers? Because they don't have enough money to buy diapers. Yeah, they're expensive. I remember that. So use them longer. Well, no, they need to change. I'm like, why? She went back and did the research. Almost wish she hadn't. Dirty diapers, yes, they're gross, but the health consequences, the educational consequences, the infections, they miss school, they miss daycare, parents miss work, there's an educational consequence. I mean, it was like, whoa, yes. And so even something as seemingly simple as we need diapers, right? When you take it down to that why level and you're kind of going, yeah, it'd be nice to have diapers. No, lack of enough diapers is a public health issue. And so let's phrase it as such, assuming that's what the funder's interested in, and see if they won't fund it for you. So focus on the change you want to see. Your arguments then are going to stem from the change you seek. As we look ahead, and next week we're going to write your project plan, which is your solution. You need to make sure your solution can solve your problem, right? So Caitlin, will keep using your example, right? You want to buy more Christmas lights to increase tourism, right? If whatever you're going to do doesn't increase tourism, then it doesn't matter, right? Then you've identified a problem and they're going, wow, big problem. Wow, you don't solve it, so we're not going to fund you, right? And I know you do. I'm picking on that example. Oftentimes I'll see, if we're talking about hunger, one of the big problems is people can't get to food pantries. There's lack of transportation. So we're going to set up a food pantry here. How are you solving the transportation issue? What are you doing, right? If you're not taking the food to the people, don't talk about transportation as an issue because you're not solving it, right? So the arguments you're going to make stem from whatever that change is that you're looking for, and which all stems from your why. Your what stems from how you will achieve your why. So how are we going to increase tourism? Because that's an issue. We're going to brighten up our Christmas festival. And to do that, we need to replace the outdated lights, and we need to add this and add this and add this, right? We tend to naturally think of our what. Because you're looking at your budget, you're going, oh, what do I need? In fact, usually we ask that question, what do you need, right? Then you have to back up and ask yourself why. What's it going to help us achieve? And when you're writing, write it backwards, right? Starting with your why. Some common errors that I find in, need statements. Number one is the biggest. Don't talk about you, talk about them. Your organization's name should not appear anywhere in your needs statement. This is not about you, this is about your community. So actually, once you write a needs statement, in theory, you don't have to write it again. The reality is you have to customize it for your clientele. But once I understand what's the need, hunger need in my community, that doesn't change from application to application, okay? There are exceptions to this. And that is, and Kelly's, yours is a good example of one of the exceptions. So I'm glad you're writing that one, because that will help us talk about that one too. Because your need is an internal organizational need, right? You need more space. Like, Lindsay, are you writing for strategic planning?
Mhm.
Yours would be the same thing, right? There's something within your organization that the support is for you. Yes, it's supporting your clients, but there's the connection's less. If you're right, and if you who are local writing a capacity building grant for the community foundation, those tend to be more focused on you. But that said, when I would write a need statement for something like that, that starts with, who do you serve? Why is that important? Why is what you do important? Because I'm not gonna fund expanding your office if you're not doing anything of value in the community. I'm not gonna fund your strategic plan if your organization isn't worthwhile. I don't care what you plan if you're not doing anything good, right? So the way I would write those need statements would be, here's who we serve, here's why they're important, here's why there's a great need. My guess is you need more space, Kelly, because your demand is growing and you're expanding your capacity, right? And so we've seen, here's why the people we work with need work with. Here's why equine therapy is important. We've seen a explosion in the numbers lately. It's that because of that, we need to hire more staff. We don't have anywhere to put them. If we can't put them anywhere, they're gonna be in the horse stalls with the horses, and that's not the best environment for working, right? Then you can talk a little bit about what is your physical need. Too often I see grants like that where it's just, we're out of room. We need more room. I'm going, so what's more room gonna buy you? Right? Same thing with yours, Lindsay, right?
Mhm.
Ovarian cancer is a problem. There's not enough information about ovarian cancer out there. There's so many ways we could go, but we need to invest our energy where we can do the most good. We can do that if we have a strategic plan. Does that make sense? Most of the rest of you, at least what I remember of what you're writing, we should not hear about your organization. It should all be about your clients. Okay. Oftentimes I'll get a need statement, it'll be, hunger is really bad. My organization solves hunger and we do great work and blah, blah. I'm going, that's not a need. Yes, that will come. There's a place to talk about your organization, but it's not in the needs. Okay. Other problems focuses too much on the what, not the why. Why is hunger a problem? I mean, yeah, tell me how many people, but let's take it to the next what or so what level. Too much story or too much data. You want to have a good balance between your story and your data. What's the good balance is going to depend upon your need, your story, your audience. So that's just kind of one of those feel things. If your data doesn't support your claims, it's just claim. It's poorly written. We're spending our last session talking about how to write well. But just make sure that you can write well and communicate it very clearly. And most importantly, maybe it's got to be clear to your reader. Not only should you read it and go, holy cow, let me grab my wallet. Ask somebody else to read it and see how they feel once they finish it. And in here, you have a built-in audience, right? I mean, I'll read all of these and hopefully you guys are reading and commenting on each other's. And this is something too, where I think you'll get a lot of value reading each other's, what each other does well, what each other does not so well, and kind of, do you understand it? Because we have a lot of different projects and they don't all fall within our, everyone's area of expertise. And comment on each other's kindly. Don't just say, wow, this is great. Point out, I didn't understand this sentence, or I don't see why this is a need, or, gently helping each other to improve them as well. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it. I don't remember what TV show that's. You're going to write a needs statement that has arguments, tells a story, focuses on the why, describes the community, not your organization. Focus on the problem, not the solution. I don't want to hear word one about what you're going to do. That's next. You're going to want to jump into, and we can feed people and we can do this and we can do that. That's next. So hold all those thoughts. Questions, comments, thoughts? Are your needs statements percolating up here, or are you just kind of percolating?
Actually, should this be a needs statement to coincide with the one we presented for the last assignment? Do they need to be related?
They don't have to be, because you can do whatever you want. But the thought is, let's continue with the same project throughout the class. Because we'll just keep building upon it, and you'll have this framework of a decent application. But if you change it, it's not a big deal.
Okay, I'm a person that has my finger in a few different pies. So as I do these things, I get inspired by different scenarios that are in divergent fields. I work in art, but I also work in healthcare. So I just was curious, but yeah, I can stick to the same thing.
Yep.
I was just wondering if I could take any liberties.
If you get inspired and you want to change. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. All right.
Kelly, did you have a question or comment?
Nope.
Okay. I thought I saw you on mute. Any other thoughts before we sign off?
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is probably the hardest part.
And Linda, I wanted to say your material is very well organized. It's been so easy to follow. I mean, missing that last class even, I was so amazed at how much information you had at my fingertips that was so easy to access. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right.
Have a good one, everyone.
All right. You too. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.